Telemetry is what turns security from a set of policies into an evidence-driven discipline because it supports detection, accountability, and investigation in ways that static controls never can.
When something goes wrong, the first question is rarely, what controls should have prevented this? Because prevention is imperfect and reality is messy. The first question is usually, what happened? Followed closely by, how do we know? And those questions are answered by the signals your assets generate and the way you retain and analyze them. Telemetry also supports accountability because it provides a factual record of actions taken, changes made, and access exercised, which helps separate mistakes from misuse and routine operations from suspicious activity. If you want to make reliable security decisions over time, you need logging and monitoring that is designed intentionally rather than assembled accidentally. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to the CISS books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Logs are recorded events produced by systems and applications, and they are the raw narrative of what the asset believes occurred at a given moment. A log entry might represent a user sign-in, a service starting, a configuration change, a failed access attempt, a file read, or an application error, depending on the source. Logs vary widely in quality, structure, and completeness because different products and teams implement logging with different priorities and different assumptions about who will consume the output. From a security perspective, logs matter because they capture both normal activity and abnormal behavior, and they give you the ability to reconstruct sequences of events after the fact. The practical challenge is that logs are abundant, inconsistent, and often ignored until an incident forces someone to care, so the engineering work is in making them reliable and usable ahead of time. Monitoring is different from logging, even though the two are tightly linked, because monitoring is the continuous observation of signals and behavior with the goal of detecting meaningful changes. Logs are one kind of signal, but monitoring can also include metrics, traces, network flow records, and external observations that are not strictly logs in the traditional sense. Monitoring is about watching for conditions that matter, such as unusual authentication activity, unexpected configuration drift, spikes in data access, or degradation in service health that may indicate an attack. It also includes the process of turning signals into alerts, dashboards, and investigations, which is where human judgment and automation meet. A system can be logging heavily while being poorly monitored if nobody is looking for the right patterns or if the alerts are so noisy that responders learn to ignore them. Effective monitoring is therefore as much about selecting and interpreting signals as it is about collecting them. Metadata is the context that makes logs and signals interpretable, and it often answers the questions that matter most in investigations. Who did what, when it happened, and where it originated. Who might be an identity, an account, a role, a service principal, or an application identity, and the interpretation depends on how identity is managed in that environment. What might be an action like reading an object, modifying a policy, creating a resource, or changing a firewall rule, and it should be captured in a way that is specific enough to support decisions. When includes a timestamp, but it also includes time zone expectations and ordering because sequence matters more than absolute time in many investigations. Where can include the host, the network segment, the region, the Internet Protocol address, spelled out as Internet Protocol address on first mention, and sometimes the device posture or location context that helps you evaluate whether the activity is plausible.
Certain event types are consistently valuable across most environments because they represent control points where attackers and insiders tend to operate. Authentication events show attempts to prove identity, including successes and failures, and these events help you spot brute force behavior, credential stuffing, and unusual sign-in patterns. Authorization events show what an authenticated identity was allowed to do, which is essential for confirming whether an action was permitted by policy or happened through privilege escalation. Configuration events capture changes to settings, policies, network rules, logging itself, and other controls, and these are often the most important evidence in determining how an environment was opened or weakened.
Data access events capture reads, writes, downloads, exports, deletions, and permission changes for sensitive datasets, and they are central for detecting exfiltration and for scoping exposure. When these event categories are consistently logged, you can correlate behavior across assets and reconstruct attacker pathways with far less guesswork. Time synchronization is a foundational requirement because event correlation depends on accurate timestamps, and even small clock drift can break investigative timelines. If one system is a few minutes ahead and another is a few minutes behind, an attacker's sequence of actions can appear out of order, which complicates correlation and slows down response. Time synchronization also affects detection logic, because many alerts depend on counting events within defined windows, and those windows become unreliable when clocks disagree. In distributed environments, time synchronization must be treated as an operational control with monitoring, because drift often emerges during resource pressure, misconfiguration, or partial outages. A common anchor is Network Time Protocol, spelled out as Network Time Protocol on first mention, but the technical mechanism matters less than the operational outcome of consistent, validated time across critical assets. When time is trustworthy, telemetry becomes coherent, and coherence is what makes rapid analysis possible under pressure. Centralized collection reduces tampering and improves analysis because it moves logs from the asset, where an attacker may gain control, to a protected repository where alteration and deletion are more difficult. If logs remain only on the compromised host, adversaries can erase evidence, disable logging, or alter files to confuse investigators, and those actions are common in real intrusions. Centralization also improves analysis by providing a single place where data can be normalized, indexed, correlated, and searched across many asset types. The central store must itself be protected because it becomes a high-value asset that contains sensitive operational information and often personal identifiers. Collection pipelines should be resilient so that network disruptions or high load do not silently drop events during the exact period you most need visibility. When centralized collection is designed well, it turns isolated log fragments into an environment-wide narrative. Retention is not just a storage decision because it is a risk management decision shaped by investigations, regulatory needs, and operational troubleshooting. Investigations often require looking back weeks or months to establish initial access, lateral movement, and patterns of behavior, especially when adversaries are quiet and patient. Regulatory and contractual requirements may mandate retaining certain logs for specific periods, and those mandates can vary by industry and jurisdiction, which means retention planning has to be explicit and defensible. Operational troubleshooting also drives retention because diagnosing recurring failures or intermittent performance issues often requires historical context that is not visible in real time. Longer retention increases cost and increases the sensitivity of the logging environment because you are storing more potential evidence and more personal data. A sound retention strategy, therefore, balances the need to investigate and comply with the need to minimize unnecessary data accumulation.
Integrity protections make logs reliable as evidence, and they also deter attackers who would prefer to erase their tracks. Write-once storage, often implemented with immutability controls, helps ensure that once logs are written, they cannot be modified or deleted for a defined period, even by administrators. Hashing techniques can provide tamper evidence by allowing you to verify that a log dataset has not changed since it was written, because even a small modification will produce a different hash.
The details of implementation vary, but the security objective is consistent. You want to be able to trust that the record you are reading represents what was collected at the time. Integrity protections should also cover the collection pipeline and the time source, because attackers may try to manipulate events before they are stored, or distort timestamps to confuse correlation. When integrity is designed in, logs become more than operational data. They become credible evidence. Alerting is the operational expression of monitoring, and it typically combines thresholds, baselines, and anomaly detection approaches. Thresholds are straightforward rules such as too many failed sign-ins or a sudden spike in deletions, and they work well for clear-cut high-risk conditions. Baselines are learned expectations of normal behavior for a given system or identity, and they help reduce noise by comparing activity to what is typical rather than to a generic global threshold. Anomaly detection looks for patterns that differ from normal in more complex ways, such as unusual sequences of actions or rare combinations of access and location, though the results must be tuned to avoid flooding responders. The art is in aligning alerts to response capability, because an alert that cannot be investigated or acted upon is not a control, it is a distraction. Good alerting improves both speed and confidence by directing attention to the small number of events that deserve human judgment. Different asset types have different logging needs, and a program that treats all assets the same usually ends up with gaps in the places that matter most. Endpoints need logs that capture process execution, privilege changes, malware detections, and system-level events that reveal persistence and lateral movement techniques. Servers need logs that reflect service behavior, authentication, remote administration actions, configuration changes, and application-specific events that indicate misuse of business logic or exploitation of exposed interfaces. Cloud services generate control plane logs, data plane logs, and identity events that are often essential for understanding how resources were created, modified, and accessed, especially when infrastructure is ephemeral. Each category also has performance and cost considerations, because logging every event at maximum verbosity may be impractical, so you choose what matters based on threat models and investigation needs. When asset-specific logging is intentional, you reduce blind spots without drowning the organization in unusable volume. Privacy considerations matter because logs often contain personal identifiers, and that means logging can create its own compliance obligations and ethical risks. Personal identifiers can include usernames, email addresses, Internet Protocol addresses, device identifiers, and sometimes more sensitive content if applications log request payloads or error context poorly. The security team must balance visibility with data minimization by collecting what is necessary for detection and investigation while avoiding unnecessary capture of sensitive personal data. Access to logs should be restricted and audited because logs can reveal behavioral patterns and sensitive operational details, and misuse of that information can harm individuals and the organization.
Retention should reflect privacy requirements as well as security needs, because keeping personal data longer than necessary can increase exposure and conflict with privacy expectations. When privacy is treated as part of logging design, telemetry becomes sustainable rather than becoming a quiet liability. Log quality determines whether telemetry is useful, and quality is driven by completeness, noise control, and consistent formatting. Completeness means the right events are captured reliably across the assets that matter, and that logging does not drop silently during failures, high load, or misconfiguration. Noise refers to low-value events that flood storage and dashboards, making it hard to find meaningful signals. And noise must be managed through tuning, sampling, or more selective collection. Consistent formatting matters because analysts and automated systems rely on predictable fields, timestamps, identity representations, and action names to correlate activity across sources. Without normalization and consistent context, investigations become manual translation exercises that waste time and increase error risk. When quality is engineered, logs stop being a chaotic pile of text and become a structured data set that supports repeatable analysis. Over time, logs and metadata are what make asset activity visible, comparable, and defensible across normal operations and abnormal events. Logs capture the events. Monitoring interprets the signals. And metadata provides the who, what, when, and where that turns raw records into an understandable narrative. Time synchronization and centralized collection make correlation possible and reduce the chance that attackers can erase evidence when visibility matters most. Retention, integrity protections, and alerting ensure that telemetry remains available, trustworthy, and operationally actionable rather than existing only as a compliance artifact. Asset-specific logging choices and privacy-conscious handling ensure that the program reflects real system behavior and real organizational obligations. When these pieces work together, you get durable visibility, which is the foundation for consistent detection, credible accountability, and effective investigation across the full life of your assets. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.